Yeah, when I was working at Deloitte, I ran a DJ business for weddings, and I also worked at a bar at like a really trendy bar. And at the beginning, one of the partners was actually like not a fan of that, and he's like, it's like a bit of like an image problem. And I kind of just said, okay, well, there's a $25,000 hole in my bank account if I stop doing this. Are you willing to fill it? And then I'll stop, no problem. And then they said, absolutely no problem. Keep going, because they didn't want to have that conversation.
I'm Brannon Poe, and this is the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast, where you can enjoy engaging conversations about mergers and acquisitions and accounting practice management. Listen in on strategies to build a more fun and valuable accounting firm. Hi, welcome to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. I've got a wonderful guest, Dominic Piscopo, today. Did I pronounce that correctly, Dominic?
You nailed it. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. This is going to be an interesting one because this is a product or a service that I've never seen before. And I think a lot of people who are going to listen to this haven't heard about this before either. So this is really going to be interesting. A little bit about Dom. He is the founder of Big Four Transparency, which is the largest crowdsourced database of accounting salaries on the market with over 18,000 rows of clean, standardized data. Big Four Transparency is where 250,000 plus accounting professionals go for high quality salary data. This is why this is interesting. I didn't know this data existed. Dom created this based on his own experience as a CPA working in tax at Deloitte and his frustrations on how difficult it was to find proper salary data. So he's now built a business around it, and he's charging firms a subscription fee for access to in-depth analytics on this data set with quarterly updates, helping them set salaries without all the legwork of being involved in compensation surveys. So really cool, Dom. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure being on. You've been kind of on my radar for a long time, and I finally managed to get in touch with you through, I think, one of your colleagues. I think I got a wrong number and I got connected to someone, and it's been really awesome knowing you so far as well.
Yeah, likewise. I like what you're doing, and I know I put you in front of one of our Accounting Practice Academy members, and I think he signed up. So that's pretty cool that you got.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So how did you just go back a little bit? I know you were at Deloitte, you were frustrated, but can you tell us more about where the idea came from and how you went about getting this business started?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the reason that it's so unique is that it's really not a straightforward business. There's been a lot of copycats trying to kind of do what I did, and they haven't really worked out. I was kind of just, right place, right time, right messaging, caught lightning in a bottle a little bit. So I was actually just kind of messing around. I wanted to learn how to use no-code tools. I've always been really interested in kind of entrepreneurship and that type of world, but I was never kind of brought up as a developer. And so I was just kind of like fiddling around with these tools, and I found one that interacted in an interesting way with with a backend database and then presents the data back to you. And I was just kind of trying to think of what was a good use case for this that people might use. Like, it was never intended to be a full business. It was really just kind of like, what is going to get any user through the door? And then I was spending all this time on Reddit and Fishbowl, as a frustrated accountant does. And there's always these compensation threads time and time again. And people will reference a previous one. The data gets all jumbled up. It's all lost. It's all non-standard. And I just kind of was like, guys, there's a better way to do this. And so I built this, which kind of the whole mechanism behind it makes sure everything is fully anonymized, and then collects everything in a database and presents it back to you in a nice, clean, very accountant friendly type of manner. And we all know how to kind of sort through data and filter and stuff like that. And so that was the format, and it caught on in the early days. Like, I logged in, there were a couple hundred people concurrently in the Google Docs that I had built all at once. And I was like, wow, okay, people really like this. And so I kept on just kind of maintaining it for a couple of years. And then eventually there started to be so much data there that I had firms reaching out being like, hey man, like you're really not presenting this in a way that's very user friendly for us. And we would like to be able to use this to kind of refine our own comp strategies. And that's where it was all born. So that's where, I built out kind of dashboards and stuff like that to make it very user friendly for the firms.
Yeah. I can see, I mean, I get asked all the time, like what's an appropriate salary for this position or that? And I mean, they do run the gamut though, right? I mean, you do see a lot of variation in what comp is. And I guess it varies based on geography and that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And as time's gone by, we've kind of like managed to get a better, handle on what some of those variances are. And so we've kind of like split things up a lot by streams where it's like, if you want to look at a large sample size and just get an idea at a glance, you can kind of bunch audit, tax, and CAS salaries. They're going to be in the same kind of neighborhood. And then, things like consulting, risk, financial advisory, and stuff like that are kind of in their own bucket. Whereas you don't want to mix the two because there's a big spread. And then we broke out all of the geographies across the US. Shout out to AI deep research tools for helping with this. But we broke everything out into 4 categories. So low cost of labor, medium cost, high cost, and then very high cost.
Nice.
Which simplifies. Or you can just look in your specific city as well. So, yeah.
Do you feel like there's a lot of upward price movement on, I call it price movement. I guess it's really salary movement on, okay, what's happening? What is trending in the industry as a whole? Obviously there's a shortage of talent. I think everybody's experiencing that when they go out to hire. Is that supply and demand really driving up salaries?
Yeah. So, luckily for people who are kind of early in their careers, I'm still early career, but things in my local market have moved drastically since I was like an intern. I'm talking like 25% in my local market since, 6 or 7 years ago. But yeah, no, things have definitely moved upward quite a lot, particularly kind of around the COVID time. So I only started collecting data in late 2021. But 2023 was like a big year still. It was still moving up a lot. 2024 was interesting where it was kind of not standard at all. And this is where like when firms are going in blind, you might be really, really separate from what's happening in the market. Is that what happened in 2024 is they moved very differently across different levels of seniority and different markets. So, for example, like audit, tax, and CAS were up a pretty good amount in 2024, whereas like advisory and consulting were not. They were up a much lower percent overall. I actually just did an analysis on this pretty recently for a webinar. And within like audit and tax, where these movements were a lot higher, they were also very unevenly distributed, with the junior pay going up significantly more than the kind of more senior level pay.
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Well, what do you see as the greatest challenge in the industry right now?
Greatest challenge in the industry right now, I think it's like an image problem more than anything else. And like, I think accounting is just doing a very poor job of selling itself. And we have all these kind of institutions that maybe once served us very well that are maybe no longer serving us, right? So I think that, there's this attitude of in universities, and I just did a student conference, still the case, where it's like, big four or bust. And, if you're not cut out for big four work, like you're just not going to make it in the accounting world. And like, I was a big four employee who like probably would have done a lot better somewhere different, like a more progressive firm. I was very passionate about some of the things that might have been more working on the business, and I was really, really good at them versus working in the business. Like it was fine, but it wasn't what I loved doing. And some of the structures that are in place for evaluating employee performance are so rigid, especially in these large places. It's not their fault. It has to be. Yeah. But like that, I couldn't be evaluated on where I was extremely good at adding value and where I was happy to be adding value versus like, just picking up another personal tax return at 10 o'clock. And I was like, fine, I can play that game, but I just knew there was many years ahead where I was just not going to be happy doing what I was going to be doing. And to his credit, the partner where I was at, like, openly had a conversation with me where, like, when I was asking those things, he's like, you're correct. Like, this is how it's going to be. Right. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think this like image problem where, ask someone to draw a partner, like they might not draw someone with a huge smile on their face. Like people know that you can make a ton of money, but a lot of people just like look at it as like a lifestyle that isn't what they want to align themselves with. And it's like the reality is there's so much more out there. And there are these opportunities where you can pursue different opportunities that are going to fit your lifestyle, fit your desires a little bit better. And like, I'm happy the big four paths exist as well. Like, that's fantastic for some people. But
Yeah.
like, there's just not enough messaging around like the vastness of what's out there, as well as like how good of opportunities there are. So at the time before I had built Big Four transparency, like I was getting depressed. Like you log into Glassdoor, you look up accountant salaries, and like it's not public accounting specific. It was like jumbled up with people working at H&R Block, people working at Intuit, as like tax preparers and things like that, bookkeepers, and like the numbers I was looking at were unbelievably low, and I was like, is this what I have to look forward to? But like, people need to talk about it. Like there's great opportunities in the accounting industry, and
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. I thought your answer was going to be, well, the talent shortage is the biggest problem in the industry, which, but I like what you're saying. And I agree with you. I had a similar experience, in fact. So I started out at E&Y, and like you said, it's a lot of structure. I found that wasn't really what I wanted. I went back down to as kind of a mid-sized firm, and I worked for Elliott Davis, which is a big southeastern firm, and I got a lot more variety in my work, and I was able to work with small business. And then I was really happy because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to learn business. I wanted to be able to learn small business and not just have like a slight view of like, okay, you're going to audit cash on this account, and that's all you're going to see. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you're right. I do believe there's an image problem, and I don't think. I wonder, what is the solution? I kind of think the solution is like small and mid-sized firms need to like step up and build better practices and build better careers for people. And then, if you've got something really cool going on in your firm, it's just going to attract people, and you're going to kind of create a gravity. And if more firms are doing that, it would kind of create a gravity into the profession.
Hey, this is Liesel. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Accountant's Flight Plan. We've got a special offer for our listeners. If you want to save $250 on Accounting Practice Academy, our 8-week practice management workshop, use the promo code POD250 when you submit your application and start building a practice you would buy.
Yeah, and I mean that's like it's so much to ask out of people where it's like, oh, you got to be a firm owner, you got to be like out there on social media or becoming a creator, but like I think that's super helpful. Like, people, Brandon Hall out there, like Roman Villard, like all these people, Logan Graff talking about what they're doing, I think is incredibly important for people who can kind of then be like, oh, I understand. And maybe you're someone I associate myself with. And I understand like some of the opportunities that exist for people like us. Right. And I think that's super important. But yeah, there's a lot of work needed there. It's just more conversations. And I've joked about this, but like, I've half jokingly said, we need more partners on jet skis. But like,
Yeah. Yeah.
people like celebrating what's going on instead of it being like, oh, there's this taboo. We don't talk about anything. And, we can't talk about salaries. We can't share like how the firm's doing because then people are going to want to cut. Like, why can't it be this kind of celebration with the firm as a whole? And people want to look up to someone ahead of them excelling. But like when it's all this hush hush taboo stuff, like it's not great either.
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point. Like, yeah, they need to celebrate the success. I like that. Um, so uh in contrast to challenges, what do you think is the greatest opportunity in this profession?
Interesting. I think it's probably like the emergence of, technology processes and then all of these kind of new avenues of where we can add value, right? So I think a lot of the accounting work is viewed as being a little bit mundane, where it's like, oh, you're processing journal entries and doing stuff like that. But like, that's a very small part of what the profession is. And you actually kind of like move past that, like within a couple years, typically, of your
Yeah.
career. And it becomes actually about like, client service, working with people. You might change someone's life. Like, having a proper tax structure in place, and then they sold their business and now they get QSBS or lifetime capital gains exemption. Like, some of these things are like super exciting. I'm talking a little tax specific. That's my background, but some of these things are actually like incredibly important, and you can be a huge part of what someone's doing. And I think the emergence of these technology providers, not just AI, like I think, we put a bit too much weight on that sometimes, but technology providers in general, like amazing practice management tools, like payment solutions, things like that. You can spend less and less of your time doing the kind of like more dull stuff and doing more like business management and, client relationships, all of that. So I think that's like a massive opportunity, both to, improve the perception of what we're doing and actually make it more interesting in reality as well, but also just to leverage up the amount of value that we're adding to clients, right? Where you're only focusing on kind of upper level, very high value added tasks. Well, you can start making this a more lucrative profession as well that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, lucrative and interesting and
Yeah.
and valuable. All of the things. And the tech's coming quick. It's I feel like AI may have been a little overhyped, but it's gonna eventually kind of become what we hope it will be. I do think that will happen. It just is in time.
Yeah.
So uh I've been asking guests a fairly new question as of late because what I find is people have some really interesting, funny career stories typically. Like they're even in this boring accounting industry. Um, I've heard some really cool stories. So do you have something you could share, like a funny or interesting career story?
Funny and interesting career story. I guess maybe the importance of kind of fostering who you are as like a person kind of shines through in this. But yeah, when I was working at Deloitte, I ran a DJ business for weddings, and I also worked at a bar, at like a really trendy bar. And at the beginning, one of the partners was actually like not a fan of that. And he's like, it's like a bit of like an image problem. And I kind of just said, okay, well, there's a $25,000 hole in my bank account if I stop doing this. Are you willing to fill it? And then I'll stop, no problem. And then they said, absolutely no problem. Keep going, because they didn't want to have that conversation. But pretty quickly, I actually like started like bringing in people from the bar who were like, oh, damn, like you're an accountant. Like, I actually own this flight school and we don't know how to treat our indirect taxes with all these students from China and stuff like that. Like, I think, that's an interesting story, I think, because it's like when you kind of follow your passions and or like just your areas of interest and continue being you rather than like just falling into like the typical mold, like great things can come from that. And, had I stayed there a little bit longer, like, yeah, I had like very legitimate clients or prospective clients like coming to me through all of these services. And I think like being in the DJ business like really helped me get the job too, because it was just one of the interesting things where like, people are flicking through resumes and they're like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, that's
Did you have
probably one of the fun stories.
Did you have a cool DJ name? You gotta have a DJ name.
No, I was never like pretentious enough. I just, it was just DJ Piscopo.
Yeah. I bet that was fun though. I think Ryan Lozanis was a DJ. Do you know Ryan? He's
Yeah, I spoke with Ryan. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in the Montreal market, probably a little bit more booming than where I'm at. I'm based in Ottawa, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy too.
Yeah. That's cool. And another thing I want to ask, I always get a book recommendation from my guests. And what are you reading right now? What can you recommend?
What am I reading right now? Actually, I mean, nothing like especially interesting. I'm still working my way through Buy Back Your Time. I'm reading some of the Alex Hormozy books on sales. A recommendation of one though that like I think is super impactful on me. I would say like Habits by Charles Duhigg, and it's funny because it's really not like about what we do, but I just found understanding kind of the habit loop and like reward system, and it goes into some of the like neuroscience behind some of this was
Yeah.
really rewarding for me, and being able to kind of build those good habits. And I think some of it translates in well to your work of like, having a reward system in your brain where like you can kind of like do positive reinforcement on yourself of like things that you want to keep doing. I think that was super valuable to me. And a lot of it translated very well into like marketing as well, which is interesting. And now, trying to operate my own business, like that starts to matter a lot as well. If you're into a fiction book, just The Silk Road, very topical right now. But with Ross Ulbright being, pardoned and all that, it's the whole kind of story of the Silk Road and, the early days of Bitcoin and stuff.
Oh, interesting. That does sound
Yeah.
interesting. I might have to check
Yeah.
that out. I've got a vacation coming up. I always like, I find if I have a good book for a vacation, it kind of makes the vacation if you're like going to just relax.
Yeah, and you need to like hang up the self-help books and stuff
Yeah.
like that, I think. And that one's just kind of like telling the story. It's a real story. The research that went into it is unbelievable. And yeah, I read it all in one go when I was in Mexico, kind of similar to your vacation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just reading that whole vacation, it was unbelievably good book. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, Dominic, it's really cool to have you on, and your business is. I imagine it's growing pretty rapidly. It sounds like things are going pretty well. You're kind of still in that startup mode. I love the startup period of a business. I think it's exciting. It's
I think I'm gonna love it looking back at it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's growing unbelievably fast, but like from I just took it full time in September. I did a small equity raise and became able to kind of focus all my time on it from there. One thing I'm learning about the accounting profession is things don't always move super quick.
yeah,
And so, yeah, that's sort of like where the head's at right now, where I'm working with some fantastic firms who were kind of the early adopters of this. And now there's this much bigger slice of firms that I'm working with who are just like, we'll consider it and, we'll take it through our internal, processes for onboarding tech, and it might take 6-9 months, and
yeah.
slow close processes in general in the accounting
Right.
space. And I work, in line with something that they're doing annually or semi-annually. And I try to encourage people like stay on top of compensation all the time, not just when you're doing your raises and stuff like that. Like, your FP&A team, your financial forecasting team will thank you for it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an exciting time for sure. But yeah, it's definitely a stressful and nerve-wracking time. So
Yeah.
it's a time I will look back on fondly. But while you're in it, you're like, oh man, this is this is
Yeah.
a lot. So
Well,
yeah.
I'd love to help. I'd love to help you out because I think a lot of people have a big soft spot for startups, and so maybe let's go a little bit into like I'm going to try to sell some stuff for you here today. So
Awesome.
so who's the ideal sort of client profile, or maybe you got several different profiles that really work well. Like who's your ideal client?
Yeah. So most of my clients, I would say, are between like the 50 and 400 person firms. But that being said, I work with a 10-person firm and I work with one of the big four. So, there's a pretty long tail to that.
Yeah.
I will say who I'm typically working with on kind of the smaller firm size is once you start to have several or more employees and you want to, first of all, be able to sleep at night and know that you're paying them fairly in relation to the market, but also in relation to each other. For firms who are not working with like a compensation service, a lot of what happens is your tenured employees end up paying a loyalty tax because you're just following what the market tells you and you're hiring people at market rates and then giving them a blanket 2% increase a year or whatever that is. They actually fall behind the market, and you're creating this incentive system where employees, to be paid properly, need to leave. And so a lot of kind of small firm owners start to kind of realize that, and they just want to be fair to people, or they're just pouring so much time into these processes trying to figure out how much to pay. We price everything based off of firm sizing, so we're incredibly affordable to them. In the kind of mid-size firm, often it's, we went from these sort of old processes of just trying to scrape together what we can, or God forbid, but some of them are using like recruiter salary guides and just following those, which don't do that, please. But are just kind of following that and are starting to recognize again the need for there to be structure, and the need for them to be a little bit more competitive, right? Like if you're pouring money into recruitment activities and it's not working, there's probably a reason why. And so if you actually go and you solve that problem, it's a lot better. And then for the very large firms, often it's going to be kind of like a frustration with the legacy providers. So a difference in what I offer versus what most other places offer is they mostly require you to be part of a compensation survey, which might take your HR team many days or weeks in some cases to do all the inputs required. We just serve you the data because we collect everything first party from employees. We also give quarterly updates rather than annual updates, so you're always on top of everything. And then what happens when you're in these like closed doors kind of like compensation data exchanges and things like that is you end up in a bit of a bubble, right? So you're doing what everyone else is doing, and everyone else is doing what you and everyone else in that bubble is doing. And so you get a little bit disconnected from the real market, and you sort of, you drift off in your own direction. And so they actually want to stay in touch with what's happening in the entire market. So we get data basically from every firm, especially any of the top 100 firms will have a pretty significant amount of data on. And so you actually get a view of the entire market. And so, we've had some very large firms who are working with two legacy providers to cross-check against them, against each other, eliminate one of the two that they're working with, replace it with what we're doing, and then keep the kind of CYA insurance of like, nobody's ever gotten in trouble for working with the big brand name legacy players. So, that's kind of who we're typically working with. And then for the firms that we're working with as well, around 9 months ago, we implemented a talent pool and we're able to make low cost introductions. So we charge a 6% placement fee for firms that we're working with, only if it's successful. And of that, we pay $1,000 to the candidate. So some people come through the door just really interested in that, and they just kind of get the comp data for free.
Nice.
It pays for itself, not for free, but it pays for itself in terms of like they make one placement. They're like, all right, we're in the green. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, how can people find out more about your products?
I actually relatively recently improved this, so that's good timing. If you go to big4transparency.com/4firms, or if you just go to big4transparency.com's big blue button up on the right, you'll see it. You can see exactly what the offering looks like for firms. There's a quick walkthrough of what that looks like, and a contact box there. But I'm everywhere. I could be reached via email. If we can link that, or LinkedIn as well. Yeah,
I got your email. It's Dom at big4transparency.com. And LinkedIn is just, looks like Do Piscopo.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. Dom, thanks so much for coming on and sharing this with you. It's really exciting new venture you're taking on, and wish you the best.
Thanks a ton, Brannon. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I really appreciate you bringing me on, and even let me shill my product at the end. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for listening to the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast. You can keep the momentum going by subscribing and sharing your thoughts with us. Visit our website at pogroupadvisors.com for more resources, and tune in next time for more exciting conversations like this one.